This is CBC Vancouver News.
A disaster of a season.
So we'll lose at least 50 to 70%.
BC's wine industry is pleading with the government for help. Plus, using artificial intelligence to help sell Metro Vancouver houses.
Think specifics about neighborhoods that you might not know or finances that you would require.
Why some experts are raising the alarm. And why some worry the legacy of the Air India tragedy will be forgotten. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Dan is away tonight. The BC wine industry is facing more than $100 million in lost revenue this year because of an extreme winter cold snap that decimated vineyards across the Okanagan Valley. As Brady Strachan reports, the industry is now asking for emergency relief funding to help it survive.
There's no grapes here as such, there's just a few shoots.
Despite the lush green look of this Kelowna vineyard, winemaker Grant Stanley says it's a disastrous year for grape production.
As we look around, it kind of looks like a vineyard, but unfortunately that isn't the case. The actual picking process this year will be a little like an Easter egg hunt.
An extreme cold snap over the winter froze the delicate buds that should grow into wine grapes, and in some cases killed vines entirely, leaving nothing but dead wood.
That's a dead vine, that's a full replant.
The BC wine industry says the damage is extensive across the entire Okanagan Valley, where the vast majority of the province's wine grapes are grown.
About half of the crop for this year's BC wine vintage is gone and not going to be available for making wine.
This recent cold snap is just the latest in a series of extreme weather events to hit the BC wine industry. Industry leaders are expecting $130 million in lost revenue this year, and some say some wineries could even go under.
I wouldn't be able to name names, but certainly there's a lot of threat for small wineries.
On Thursday, industry leaders got together to discuss the crop damage and the impact on winemakers who are now scrambling to find enough grapes to produce this year's vintage. Prodan says across the board, the industry is hurting.
We need the federal government to come up to the table and provide support for us, and that's what the province can do in bringing them to the table.
Prodan says without more support, the wine industry is facing substantial losses. Everything from lost revenue for winemakers to job loss in the tourism sector in the Okanagan that relies heavily on wineries. Regardless, this year's crop damage will mean less bottles on the shelves. Whites this fall and reds next spring. Sour grapes for consumers who have come to love BC wine. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
A Vancouver realtor is using artificial intelligence to help sell houses. He's invented a chat tool that pulls in-depth data from every home listed on the market and uses GPT-4 technology to tailor the buyer's prospects. But as Tanya Fletcher tells us, AI experts are also cautioning its use.
Yeah, so there you go. It knows the nearest bus stop.
David McDonald is one of the very first users of AI Property IQ. It crunches data from every MLS-listed property in Metro Vancouver, combines it with GPT-4 technology, and tells you the positives and negatives of each home.
Anything specifics about neighborhoods that you might not know or finances that you would require.
He's a client of Richard Morrison, the realtor who invented it.
This data already exists in certain websites, but it's only data. The thing that changes this particular situation is that it will be an analysis.
The tool is only on his Realty website, but it's open for anyone to access. He consulted a lawyer and researched BC's Real Estate Act before launching the system. He has deliberately trained it not to give advice, but its capabilities are constantly evolving.
I can train it so that it will be able to look up zoning regulations in the Vancouver area. And so it will be able to let the seller know, or the buyer, this is what you can do with this type of zoning.
It has capacity for competitive analysis, too. Say you're searching for a two-bedroom condo downtown. It could give you a ballpark figure, pulling in data from recent sales, even factoring in amenities like a pool or concierge.
It's still quite early days for systems like this.
This AI expert says while it's helpful for simpler questions, he warns against relying on technology alone for more complex issues.
I would just caution people that do your homework too. I surely wouldn't use it as the sole way that you're deciding how to buy it.
He also notes GPT-4's 10 to 15% error rate, an added risk to an already big investment.
Yeah, very helpful.
And then there are the intangibles.
Buying a home, a large investment like that is also an emotional commitment. And, technology is not very good at emotion.
That human connection, something that can't be replaced by robots. For now, Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
People will be heading to the polls in the Langford-Juan de Fuca by-election on Saturday. It's former Premier John Horgan's riding where he stepped down as MLA in March. Another by-election is taking place in Vancouver Mount Pleasant on the same day. Mira Baines has more on whether or not concerns in the Vancouver Island riding over healthcare and public safety may lead to change.
Former Premier John Horgan announced he would be leaving his seat in the spring.
I will be leaving my seat.
Horgan was hugely popular in his riding and took 67% of the vote in the last election. Langford-Juan de Fuca is a fast-growing area on southern Vancouver Island. It's attracting young families with better affordability, but traffic congestion is an issue. Horgan is endorsing Sook School Board Chair Ravi Parmar, running for the BC NDP, and he's hoping to win the seat.
Delivering on health care, on transportation infrastructure, and the cost of living issues impacting families in Langford-Juan de Fuca.
The BC Greens came in second last election in this riding, and in Vancouver Mount Pleasant, where another by-election is taking place on the same day. Political scientist Hamish Telford questions if there will be some changes this time around.
Is this an opportunity for voters to express displeasure with the government on certain issues that are in the Green Party bailiwick?
Green candidate Camille Curry founded BC Healthcare Matters and organized rallies to push for more family doctors.
What I have been hearing at the door when I'm chatting with people is that healthcare is definitely one of their top concerns right now.
Elena Lawson.
BC United, formerly the BC Liberals, will be testing its new name with candidate and autism funding advocate Elena Lawson.
The big one right now is crime. For a lot of people.
BC United leader Kevin Falcon highlighted concerns over public drug use in parks in the riding after decriminalization. Political watchers will also be examining results to see if the BC Conservatives gain traction. Longtime real estate agent Mike Harris is their candidate. With one BC Conservative MLA, John Rustad, in the legislature, the party is trying to get more support.
So what's the dynamic between those two center-right parties in these by-elections, and does that tell us anything about the party system generally in the province?
Voting takes place Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
With the anniversary of the Air India bombing tomorrow, a new study is shedding light on the lack of knowledge about the deadly attack and the fact that many younger Canadians have never heard of it. As Michelle Gassoub reports, experts are worried that the legacy of that tragedy will be forgotten.
The 1985 attack sent shockwaves around the world. A bomb planted on the doomed Air India Flight 182 exploded, killing 280 Canadians. But nearly 40 years later, the legacy of the mass murder isn't widely known. A new study from the Angus Reid Institute found 60% of those 18 to 34 in this country had never heard of it, and 4 out of 5 Canadians can't identify it as the worst terrorist attack in Canadian history.
The event just hasn't infiltrated Canadian public memory or public mourning in the way that we would expect an event of that scale and the kind of massive loss that it represents to have registered.
Dean co-authored a book about public memory of the attack. She says systemic racism has prevented the horrific event from being embraced as a Canadian tragedy.
And family members pointed out right after the bombing that they felt as though if it had been white Canadians who were primarily affected, there would have been much more of a public outpouring of grief and a much more effective and empathetic response from the Canadian government.
The attack was planned by a group of Sikh separatists in BC, an act of revenge on the Indian government for ordering a raid on a holy shrine, the Golden Temple. It wasn't until the 2000s that it was officially recognized as Canada's worst terrorist attack, when the events of 9/11 put a new spotlight on terror and threats to civilian aircraft.
The reframing of the bombings as a terrorist attack also happened during a politically conservative time where Canada was wanting to also bolster its anti-terrorist legislations and enact particular policies and practices around national security.
Those who study the attack say the history of the bombings should be taught in Canadian schools, so the events and lessons of 1985 aren't lost to memory. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
We turn to some developing news now. A heavy police presence and a large number of emergency responders could be seen in East Vancouver near Renfrew Street and 8th Avenue earlier this evening. A mobile command center was also on scene. As we can see here, a large section of the area has been cordoned off with yellow police tape. CBC News has reached out to Vancouver Police for more information, but has yet to hear back. A 28-year-old has died and 2 others are in hospital after a crash this morning in downtown Vancouver. The intersection of West Georgia Street and Burrard was closed for hours. Vancouver police say a blue sedan was waiting at a red light around 3 a.m. when the driver of a white van drove into the back of the vehicle. The van caught on fire and the driver had to be extracted. Both the driver of the van and their passenger were taken to hospital with serious injuries. The 28-year-old driver of the sedan died on scene. Police believe speed and impaired driving contributed to the crash. Police are still trying to figure out what caused a deadly plane crash on Vancouver Island earlier this week. It happened on Tuesday afternoon near Mizona Point in the Tassus Inlet. That's about 300 kilometers northwest of Victoria. This float plane was flying from Macedon Haida Gwaii to Tofino when it crashed and caught fire. There were 4 people on board, 2 died, 2 others survived and were transported to hospital. Police and the Transportation Safety Board, along with the Coroner Service, are still looking into the cause and have yet to identify the victims. BC Hydro has revealed it knew an underground electrical vault was dangerous 7 years before it blew up in downtown Vancouver. The president of BC Hydro says 14 vaults were identified as high risk in 2016 by the company's own assessment, warning that a failure to replace them could result in injury or death. This past February, the vault beneath the Burrard Street in front of the Marine Building exploded. Several businesses were damaged and forced to close, and 2 people suffered facial lacerations and burns.
In my more than 30-year career at BC Hydro, and in my time as president and CEO, I have never been as disappointed as I am today to share this news. I take responsibility on behalf of BC Hydro for the failures that occurred, and this incident should never have happened.
BC Hydro says it has decommissioned the other 13 vaults. A third-party investigation found the explosion was caused by a buildup of gases in the lid of an oil-filled switch. A man charged with murdering his wife in Surrey last year has pleaded guilty. The BC Prosecution Service says Navinder Singh Gill has entered a guilty plea to the charge of second-degree murder. Gill was charged with stabbing his wife to death on December 7, 2022. Navinder Gill was originally arrested at the scene. Next, the courts will decide a date for sentencing. A sexual assault charge against Kelowna's former mayor has been stayed. Colin Basran was still in office last October when he was charged. The assault allegedly happened in May of 2022, but the BC Prosecution Service now says that after careful review, the standard for proceeding with the criminal charge could no longer be met. When deciding whether to approve criminal charges, the Prosecution Service determines whether there is substantial likelihood of prosecution and whether the public interest requires a prosecution. BC's representative for children and youth is urging the province to prioritize protections for gender-diverse kids.
A particularly alarming finding is that there was a higher percentage of injury reports associated with suicidality and self-harm for Two-Spirit, trans, non-binary and gender diverse children and youth who are receiving government services compared to their cis male and cis female counterparts.
The call comes after a report released today found Two-Spirit and gender diverse kids receiving government services are not always properly supported. It suggests more needs to be done to ensure the children's right to determine their own identity and access safe and timely gender-affirming care. It also finds support workers lack knowledge about gender diversity and can be disrespectful. The City of Vancouver's new office in Chinatown is set to open in July, and if approved by Council, it will be named in honor of a Chinese-Canadian trailblazer.
Juan Alexander was a leader and a trailblazer. Through decades of persecution, his determination never wavered, and his dedication continues to be felt today.
Kam Yao is the first known person of Chinese descent born in present-day Canada and was a prominent leader in Vancouver's Chinese community in the early to mid-1900s. The office is part of the city's efforts to revitalize historic Chinatown. An American hiker was all set to tackle the West Coast Trail until the airline lost his gear. But his adventure didn't end there. When we return, we'll hear how a group of British Columbians helped him when he needed it the most. Thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Pegasus First Nations boxing coach Vernon Cook says the sport changed his life. Now he's passing his skills and passion on to the next generation of Indigenous fighters with the hopes of keeping young people busy and helping them make good life choices.
My name is Vernon Cook. I'm the head boxing coach of the Red Warriors Boxing Club here in Pegasus, Manitoba. And I've been coaching here for the past 6 years. I lived in the West End and there was a corner store. Future coach, he was actually at a sub store, so I kept going there for sandwiches and he asked me, hey, you look pretty big, would you want to try boxing? I said, sure, why not? In the early, mid-90s, there was a lot of gangs in Winnipeg and that kept me out of trouble a lot. 1, 2 hook. A former partner of mine, nephew, committed suicide, and it really hit me hard, so I think, what can I do for my community to help out? I was walking these halls and I heard a noise coming from a room, and then I looked in there. There were some boxing bags there and some kids playing with it. And I was like, dawned on me, boxing, let's do this. And that's how it started. Bear Brothers, wow, they're something else. They're hard workers. They dedicate themselves to the sport. They respect it, they take it in. They're the perfect students.
I didn't even know anything about boxing there, and then my auntie Rhonda told me there were some boxing classes going there. I really liked it, and I kept on going every day, like every single day. I stood really dedicated to it. It helps me take a lot of stress and anger out here. Yeah, every time I come here and train really hard, yeah, it makes me clear my mind and everything. Yeah, every time I come home, I just reset my mind. Yeah, I feel really good. I learned actually quite a bit about myself. Like I learned how to like control myself in that, and learn how to think. It's actually like a mind game too, like boxing. Like learns how to get strong in your mind and that.
I believe it kept them out of trouble and kept them striving for something else. And you see a lot of hard work they're doing. It could go either way, you know. They chose the right path, and I always let them know it's all about choices.
Without the boxing gym, I'll probably be just a normal kid laying at home or something. It got me really motivated. I was really kind of like, you know, wasn't as motivated as before, but now I'm like on an everyday goal. I can really inspire kids to like join boxing and that, yeah.
Just the feeling, knowing that I'm helping people, doing good. That's what I want to do, is to give back to my community. And that feeling just keeps me going. Like the Bear Brothers, they're making me proud. But I make sure what they can find from boxing is like what they can take out of it and apply to themselves later on in life. What I know is like my kindness and teachings will live long way past what I'm gone. So that's my goal.
A Utah man spent 3 years planning a hike across the West Coast Trail on Vancouver Island, only to have the airline lose his luggage and all of his camping gear. But through Facebook and the help of some kind strangers, he was able to complete his adventure. He spoke with CBC's Gloria Makarenko about his struggles and ultimate triumph.
And that up there in the trees is the end of our trail. I am, I don't know, 1,000 feet away.
What enticed you to take on the West Coast Trail and plan for this hike in the first place?
I am an avid hiker, but I've always had just a lot of love for the Northwest. And several years ago, when I was looking at different hikes in the Northwest, the West Coast Trail just kept popping up. You're trying to amass the right kind of gear for those kind of conditions. Food, gear, physical training, getting airline tickets. Woohoo!
So, well, how did you do your research? Are there groups of people that you build off other people's experience?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a part of a Facebook group called the West Coast Trail.
Okay, so all this planning, you know what's going in the pack. You get to Victoria and...
Voila, no backpack.
Oh.
Nothing came off the baggage carousel. And then I kind of went through all the cycles of grief in about 15 minutes. And well, when I had posted that, information that I didn't get the bag, there was a huge outpouring. And one woman in particular, Valerie, was kind enough to reach out to Michael Anderson, and he came and he picked me up on Saturday morning.
This is the biggest beach on this hike by 300 times.
He outfitted me with the backpack, the tent, poles, sleeping bag, sleeping mattress, gaiters, rain gear, a stove. And then the second person that came up was Wayne Aiken. And he was kind enough then to pick me up in the afternoon and fill in the stuff that Mike didn't.
What an incredible experience.
How was the trek?
It was beyond what I could have imagined. Breathtaking wildlife and scenery.
Really grateful. A lot of people made this happen. So.
What about your original gear that somehow got lost on the way to Victoria? Did you ever get your gear back?
When I landed at 9:45 p.m. on Sunday night, that flight got my bag there 20 minutes later. I actually have it on video. And I think it was the universe just saying, I think you got a little too attached to your stuff and a little too precious, so we're gonna throw a little curveball to you. And it was actually a beautiful and really great thing.
Boy, I just got a lot of energy back. Just walking to the end of the trail now.
Thanks to all the amazing Canadians that have helped me and really taught me some beautiful lessons.
Here we have a live shot of the White Rock Promenade, and as we can see, we love seeing all those beautiful lights reflecting off the water. When we come back, Johanna will have your full forecast.
Highway 99 North is best known as the road to Whistler through Squamish, and little else to both locals and travelers. Most tourists take the Britannia up Howe Sound to Squamish, and they all seem to know about the Royal Hudson Steam Train. Though in many ways Squamish has been regarded as the end of the line, and recently the town of 12,000 has been hard hit. The local pulp mill became strike-bound 2 weeks ago, with others in the province. Then the local sawmill went down with nowhere to sell its wood chips. 1 in 4 breadwinners was out of work. Then came the tourists in droves. They have single-handedly boosted a sagging economy. This is the reason for the tourist boom. International travelers are being told about the new Coast Mountain Circle route, and they're heading north.
We didn't realize that 99 went through, and we thought we were going to have to turn around and go through Vancouver and go back down south. But we realize now that we can go through and continue on our vacation, the northern part.
So that's the route you're going to go?
Yes.
See some of the Wild West?
We hope so. We hope so.
Taking May 1991 and comparing it to May 1992, we're up well over 100%. And when the tourists come in and get the information from it, most of them are coming over the Coast Mountain Circle route. If there's ever such a thing as a good time for a strike, especially one that affects so many people, I think that we're very fortunate it's happening during this time when we're seeing such a huge influx of tourists into the area and, of course, going into our local businesses.
The route to Vancouver used to be westerly over the Trans-Canada Highway. Few ventured north because of an infamous unpaved section of mountain road known as the Duffy Lake section. Now that has all changed with the new Duffy Lake Road opening last fall.
The road that takes its name from Duffy Lake used to be one of the most challenging in the province. It was very much like this, dirt and gravel and potholes everywhere. It used to rattle vehicles almost to death when they traveled it. These days, it's a modern two-lane highway, fully paved, and it affords motorists and travelers a look at some of the best scenery anywhere.
Lillooet was once generally regarded as in the middle of nowhere because it was on the other side of the treacherous unpaved Duffy Lake Road. Some nights the town is jammed and it's hard to get a motel room, making business owners very pleased.
Where they used to go down the Fraser Canyon or through the Coquihalla, now they have this, I would say, glorious route down to the coast. And it is. If you've been on that, you know what I'm talking about.
And they're stopping at places like the Sheep Pasture Golf Course.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. You can't find a golf course like this anywhere else in Canada.
Where if you hit a sheep, you got to take it?
Only if you kill it.
Alan Edwards, CBC News, Lillooet.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Well, Johanna, it was a beautiful hot day. Is that expected to stay?
Yes, in fact, getting even hotter as we head into Friday, Janella, and really a departure from the official start to the summer solstice yesterday. It was gray and cool. That high pressure ridge built right in today for the south coast. So look for those temperatures to really peak tomorrow before coming down a little bit on the weekend. And we still have to get through another round of thunderstorms for the interior. The piece really seeing that lightning activity this afternoon, seeing a few lightning strikes as far southwest as Chilliwack earlier this evening. And we still have moisture with those isolated thunderstorms through Friday and even into Saturday with a few showers lingering through the interior. Again, not a lot of moisture, but we will squeeze every last drop out of that departing low before we get into another long, hot and dry stretch. So watch the afternoon highs as we head into Friday. High 20s for the interior. It's going to feel like the high 20s here in Metro Vancouver. Coming down a little bit for the weekend. Still our seasonal low 20 temperatures for the south coast, and then Monday rebounding back into those high 20s. And I think by Tuesday, we'll be hitting the 30s for the interior. So Monday, Tuesday, we'll really start to see that fire danger creep up again. Lots of sunshine tomorrow, though, across the province. Still a moderate risk for a thunderstorm in the piece. We may see some more thunderstorm watches tomorrow afternoon. But for Metro Vancouver, look at this. There's just one rogue model that keeps trying to put a shower in Saturday morning, which wouldn't be the worst. But other than that, all the models in agreement that we are heading into another long, hot, dry stretch. So tomorrow, significantly warmer than today by a good 3 to 4 degrees. And there is a humidex out there. Coming back down to our seasonal for Saturday and Sunday, we'll introduce a few more clouds. And then that ridge finally pushes in earnest for Monday and Tuesday. So we'll really feel those temperatures build back up towards the end of next week. And Janella, I don't see a huge end in sight. So gear up for a hot, long, dry stretch.
Yes, keep that sunscreen close.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Johanna.
You're welcome.
That is your late news for this Thursday. Thank you so much for watching. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/bc. Have a great night.